Hi there, welcome back to Everyday English Podcast. I'm Myra.
And I'm Alex. Today we're diving into a topic that many English learners struggle with: how to understand fast English.
Absolutely, Alex. It can be really frustrating when you feel like you're understanding most of the English you hear, but then someone starts speaking really fast and it's like they're speaking a whole different language.
Right, Myra, it's a common issue. So let's start with why English can be so fast. One of the main reasons is the way we connect words together in natural speech. In English, we often link words, which can make it seem like we're speaking one long word. For example, take the phrase "I'm going to." In fast speech, it often comes out as "I'm gonna."
That's a great example, Alex. And it's not just about the way we pronounce words, but also the rhythm and intonation of English. English has a stress, timed rhythm, which means that stressed syllables come at regular intervals, regardless of how many unstressed syllables are in between. So, words that are less important in a sentence are often spoken more quickly and with less emphasis.
Exactly. Let's take a sentence like "I went to the store to buy some milk." The stressed words here are went, store, and milk. The other words like to, the, and some are unstressed and are spoken more quickly. This can be confusing for English learners because they might be trying to listen for every single word, when in fact focusing on the stressed words can give them the main idea of what's being said.
So how can learners start to get used to this rhythm and intonation?
Well, one great way is to listen to a lot of English. Listen to podcasts, watch movies and TV shows, and try to pay attention to the rhythm and intonation. Notice how the speakers stress certain words and how they link words together. You can also try shadowing, which is when you listen to a native speaker and repeat what they say immediately after them. This helps you get used to the way English is spoken naturally.
Shadowing sounds like a really effective technique. I know a lot of learners are also worried about the speed of English because of all the different accents. There are so many accents in the English speaking world, from British and American to Australian and Indian. How can they deal with that?
That's a valid concern, Myra. The key is to expose yourself to as many different accents as possible. Don't just stick to one type of English. Listen to podcasts from different countries. Watch movies with actors from various backgrounds. This will help you get used to the different ways people pronounce words. Also, keep in mind that while accents may sound different, the grammar and vocabulary are generally the same. So if you focus on understanding the underlying structure of the language, the accent becomes less of a barrier.
Another thing that makes English seem fast is the use of idiomatic expressions and phrasal verbs. These can be really difficult to understand, especially when they're used in fast conversation.
You're right. For example, if someone says, "I'm really swamped at work," a non-native speaker might not immediately understand that swamped means very busy. To get better at understanding these, learners should build up their knowledge of common idioms and phrasal verbs. Read books, watch English, language shows with subtitles, and look up any expressions you don't understand. Make a list and review it regularly.
And practice using them too, right? Because if you don't use them, you're likely to forget them.
Absolutely. Try to use new idioms and phrasal verbs in your own conversations. You can also create flashcards with the expression on one side and the meaning and an example sentence on the other. This can be a great way to review and reinforce your learning.
Let's talk about listening strategies. What are some practical things learners can do when they're faced with fast English in a real life situation, like a conversation or a lecture?
One strategy is to predict what the speaker is going to say next. If you know the topic of the conversation, you can use your background knowledge to anticipate some of the words and ideas that might come up. For example, if you're listening to a conversation about a football match, you can expect words like goal, team, score, etc.
That makes sense. Another thing is to not panic if you don't understand every word. It's important to keep listening and try to get the overall meaning. Sometimes you can figure out the meaning of a word from the context.
Exactly. For instance, if someone says, "I can't believe how expensive that new gadget is. It cost an arm and a leg." Even if you don't know the idiom "cost an arm and a leg," you can guess from the word "expensive" that it means it was very costly.
Taking notes can also be helpful, especially in a lecture or a longer talk. You can jot down key words and phrases to help you remember the main points.
Yes, but don't try to write down every word. Just focus on the most important information and make sure you're still listening while you're taking notes. You don't want to get so caught up in writing that you miss what the speaker is saying next.
What about improving your vocabulary? How does that tie in with understanding fast English?
Well, the more words you know, the easier it will be to understand what people are saying. When you have a larger vocabulary, you're more likely to recognize words even when they're spoken quickly. And it also helps you understand the context better. For example, if you're listening to a conversation about environmental issues and you know words like pollution, sustainable, and deforestation, it will be much easier to follow the conversation.
So how can learners expand their vocabulary?
Reading is one of the best ways. Read books, articles, blogs, anything in English. When you come across a new word, look it up in a dictionary, write it down, and try to use it in a sentence. You can also use vocabulary apps like Duolingo or Memrise. These apps make learning vocabulary fun and convenient.
And don't forget about word roots, prefixes, and suffixes. Learning these can help you figure out the meaning of new words. For example, if you know that the prefix un means not, then words like unhappy and unfair become easier to understand.
Right. Another aspect of understanding fast English is improving your listening comprehension skills. You can do this by doing listening exercises. There are many websites and apps that offer listening comprehension activities. These exercises usually involve listening to a passage and then answering questions about it.
That's a great idea. And it's important to start with materials that are at your level. If you try to listen to something that's too difficult, you might get discouraged. But as you improve, you can gradually move on to more challenging material.
Absolutely. Also, try to listen to different types of English, not just formal English. Listen to conversations between friends, interviews, and even street talk, though this will give you a more well-rounded understanding of the language.
Let's talk about pronunciation again. If you can pronounce words correctly, it can also help you understand them better when you hear them.
True. When you know how a word is supposed to sound, it's easier to recognize it in fast speech. Learners should practice their pronunciation regularly. They can use pronunciation apps like Elsa Speak, which provides feedback on your pronunciation. You can also record yourself speaking and compare it to a native speaker.
And pay attention to the sounds of English that don't exist in your native language. For example, the TH sound in English is difficult for many learners because it doesn't exist in some languages. Practice making that sound until you can do it easily.
Exactly! Another thing that can help with understanding fast English is learning about English sentence structure. If you know how sentences are typically constructed in English, it's easier to follow what someone is saying, even if they're speaking quickly.
Can you give an example, Alex?
Sure, in English, we usually have a subject, verb, object structure. So a sentence like she, subject, eats, verb, and apple, object. If you understand this basic structure, when you hear a sentence in fast speech, you can more easily identify the different parts of the sentence and understand the meaning.
That's a really useful point. And it's also important to be patient with yourself. Learning to understand fast English takes time and practice.
Yes, it does. Don't expect to become an expert overnight. Keep practicing, keep listening, and keep learning. And remember, every small step you take is progress.
So, to sum it up, we've talked about the importance of getting used to the rhythm and intonation of English, dealing with different accents, learning idiomatic expressions and phrasal verbs, using listening strategies, expanding your vocabulary, improving your pronunciation, understanding sentence structure, and most importantly, being patient with yourself.
That's right, Myra. With consistent effort and the right strategies, anyone can improve their ability to understand fast English.
Well, that's all for today's episode of Everyday English Podcast. We hope you found these tips helpful.
If you have any questions or comments, or if there's a topic you'd like us to cover in a future episode, please leave us a message on our website.
Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Bye for now.